is gonna happen? We have Cecilia and Marcus on stream. And in the room there's Anders, Håkan and Sanna. Cecilia is waving. Very good. Close your eyes and just notice that there is no real difference between what we refer to as the external and the internal. There's only experiencing. Every moment just happening. And there is nothing personal with those happenings, whether it's thoughts or emotions or any content. And behind this symphony of color and forms and experiences, there is something unmoving. It's actually not very hard to recognize because that is what gives the sense that the consciousness is changeful. And if you don't lend yourself to the experience, you will automatically come here. And I understand that those words make it sound like there is something that you can do. But the only thing there is not to be in your own way. Not to believe any falsehoods about yourself and about your experience. And I know that truth is a loaded word in our culture. But this truth takes you to this moment. It's not a subjective truth. It's not an opinion. It's the truth of being. And of course, the egoic mind can have its opinion of it. But that is just another thought. The experience itself is always as it is. And it's easy to think that you somehow have to enhance the present moment. Deepen it. And it's easy to confuse it with an experience. But it is just pure beingness. It is not a thing. The sense of separation creates striving, creates the search. Because you notice that there is no fulfillment. It's just a restless mind jumping from one thing to the next. But there is something intuitive in you that knows that this thirst can be quenched. So you look. You might look in external things. You might try different approaches, different meditation methods. And if you try a lot of different of them, you will find some more profound than others. But you will also find that they always lead to the same thing. It leads to the question, who is meditating? And if you practice regularly, you will notice that meditation comes to you. I'm wording it like that because it is a spontaneous event. A friend of mine who's been meditating for many years claimed that meditation was pure luck. but I don't agree with this assessment. Because in that case, you seem to be much more lucky if you're sincere in your practice. So and maybe that's the answer. And if your intentions is to know yourself and know what this experience is, you seem to become more lucky, if you want to call it that. Because in your efforts, you will see how you stand in your own way. And the seeing itself creates space. And the best tell of progression in meditation is that the mind becomes quiet. I know it's easy to misinterpret this and trying to make your mind quiet. That is not what I'm suggesting. Look how to be natural with your experience and see how the mind quiets down. And be humble enough to know that you don't know. But meditation is not a progression. In the normal sense of progression, there would be an idea of a progression as being a better meditator. But it's just a recognition to not stand in your own way. To refrain from always going into personhood. to just be as you are. And it can seem like you have to really concentrate to stay. To just stay as you are. Like you're being bombarded with thoughts. And even though that happens, you stay. It seems like an effort. Seems like coming back and coming back and coming back. And the mind might say, it's so hard. It takes so much effort. It's just because the dualistic nature of it. It's like serving two masters. It can feel contradictory. Like you're swinging from one thing to the other. But one of these masters is just a paper king. Its silhouette looks like something. But as soon as you come close and really see what it is, it just folds. This is the egoic mind. It asserts its power in time and distance. But when it's scrutinized, when you look at what it really is, it folds. It cannot stay. And on the surface, the paper king can seem so real, creating tremendous havoc in the dualistic mind. Open your eyes, move your body if you need to. The effort that might be needed in sadhana can create confusion. It can create a feeling that the harder you work, the better. That if I just go really hard, it is much better. But this approach actually just creates more dualistic, a sense of the world being dual. Because it right away creates the sense that you are not enough and therefore has to compensate. But you are perfect. You are absolutely enough. Because what is lack? Lack pertains always to a someone. And the more effort there is around that lack, the stronger the sense of being separate. And if this initial impulse of trying harder subsides, there is the intuitive sense of sincerity that can shine. And that sense just has this pure longing to be. So without effort, you just come back. You can see how the mind wants its things, how it's trying, but you listen to the longing. Intuitive sense that just wants to be. It is scary at first. Because it goes against what you have learned. And you might doubt your value. You might doubt your worth. But all these things belongs to the egoic mind. There's such a tremendous difference between saying that there is no purpose with a smile, or saying it with terror in your heart. Because in there not being a particular purpose gives you freedom. The natural freedom of the moment. And it's just the separate idea of the person that suffers, that there is no meaning. If this scares you, that is fine. And as usual, you don't have to believe me. I just want you to look. I want you to question and see what it does. And see if you explore this, if your mind gets more silent, becomes more natural. Just look. And in a way it's a paradox, because the freedom from meaning makes every moment precious. And in a deeper sense, that's of course creates a purpose for everything. This is the paradox of meditation.
I didn't understand what you mean by purpose for everything.
Okay. I just meant that in the present moment, if that is prominent, life becomes very precious. I just want to emphasize that, because when we talk about meaning, the egoic mind always plays with meaningful and meaningless. It just wants to go between these extremes. But the moment itself is just precious. And in that, you could say lies a sense of purpose. But yeah, yes, a combination of purpose and purposelessness. Because it is not, the value is not out of time. It's not in time. It's not created by time. And there are many paradoxes between how the egoic mind perceives the world and how beingness perceives the world. And the mind usually tries to combine these as ideas. And one of them is only through experience, and the other one lives almost completely out of ideas. And those realms are just very, very different. And if you just watch your inner dialogue or monologue, you will notice that the things that it talks about is mainly in time. It's quite rare that it has to do with just observation of this moment. And if you observe children, for example, when they play, they usually just point out what is there. Because their mind has not been so adultified. And with staying as beingness or meditation or what you want to call it, comes the qualities that you will be less interested in things. You will hear speculative things about the world and feel that they feel so abstract and non-real that it's not relevant to you. Even if people around you seem to believe it. It becomes clear that the world is presented around you in a very subjective way, and that there is always an agenda. And even the ones that say that they are fair and balanced can have a strong agenda, because for them it's just normal. I met a man once who said that he was going to start a political party. And he had a revolutionary idea. He said that this political party will be governed by common sense. And I told him, I have bad news for you. I think that all political parties think that.
Yes.
But we're so easily biased.
My common sense.
Yes, and who has the best common sense? So I understand that people sometimes feel like meditation is very abstract. It's spiritual. It's nothing you can hold on to. And even the things that they say, don't believe my words. Believe your experience. Try for yourself. Stay as beingness. Question the self. But in actuality, when you practice it, you will start to feel that that is the only thing that is real. That all other things are much more abstract. They seem on the surface more solid because you can take a standpoint for or against. But in actuality, they're just a play. They're a play with victimhood, separation, for, against, hope, hopelessness. And people make very broad statements like, the world is falling apart or the world is burning. But that is just an attitude, because what is the world? Is beingness burning? And that the priority of the present moment is so low. For many people, the present moment is just my shitty situation right now. Right? Too many bills this month, and this and that happened. But the present moment is all there is. There is no alternative present moment. But there is ideas that you can escape into. Your hope of a better future and things that are in alignment with that. And then you start to play the mind's game of time. And it distracts you for a while. But then there is a strong disconnect. And when the egoic mind gets a lot of space, it also creates a lot of tension. And then you come to a point where you can't take it anymore. You have to cry or scream or whatever happens. Or some people drink a lot of alcohol so they can just live out their things. But I think it's really good to look at things, to see these behaviors, and to not shun them. It's also so easy to become this meditator that has chosen the holy path and everyone else is sinners and fallen to the side. When you understand how dependency works with the egoic mind, you will understand how addiction works in you and in others. And when you cannot see through it, you will be a victim of it. And that is how ignorance works. And just be very real with those things, not to push them away or belittle them. And you might say that your life has been hard in certain ways, or challenging, or there has been so much suffering. But it has brought you to this. It has brought you into a conversation about what is this experience? What is life? I think that is the most precious conversation you can have. And the sadhana itself, the practice itself, can seem so harsh at times. Because you do your things from the best of your ability, just to find out that your sadhana is pointless. That what the egoic mind thought the sadhana would do, that is not what's going to happen. And that you cannot think yourself to the point where you know what's going to happen. Because you don't know what you don't see. If you would know how you are blind, you would not be blind. But that is why trying is needed. And there has to be some effort, just to show that no effort is needed. You do your self-inquiry to the point where you realize, oh, but I'm really looking for something all the time. I want something to happen. I almost have excitement sometimes when I do my inquiry. But where does that come from? Who is it that wants this trip, this experience? This deep explosion of silence, or implosion perhaps. And perhaps you have the experience that it feels like the foreground and the background shifts for a while. And there is spaciousness. Everything is quiet. And it goes back, and then you long. You long for it to happen again. This is how the mind plays with time. But all that is always here. And the mind might say, but in that I am dying. In just this present moment, there is no space for the mind. There can be a feeling of dying. But this death is symbolic. And the sense of dying touches the deepest part of our fears. They all spring from that. All fears spring from the fear of the egoic death. And not many people stay with that. They instead listen to the paper king. The paper king is a king made of cardboard. He throws a large shadow. It seems very real. But when you come close, you can just fold him up. That is the egoic mind. But since we fear our fears, and especially death, loneliness, insanity, the egoic mind can play us with those. The paper king can have its power.
But if we don't feel any fear for death or insanity or loneliness, is it just hidden somewhere? Do you think so?
Most people would say that they are not fearful.
Yeah.
When we start to talk about fear, people can say, yes, the last time I felt fear, I was in this situation, almost hit by a car, or something like that. But the fear, these kind of fears, the fear of loneliness or insanity or not being loved or whatever you want to call it, they're all intertwined. For example, the fear of not being loved can have so many expressions in every moment, but you just take it as normal. You just do things, yes. And also with loneliness, if you have a fear of being lonely, you can just say, but I really like to hang out with people. Always. But you might have a very deep fear of just being alone. But that is the expression, and usually this talk that we have inside, it just creates a story that is positive and appealing. So it sounds like our fear is actually something good. And that makes us not very keen on also looking at that fear. Because we say, this behavior creates my whole career. I talked to a friend of mine who is a musician and has lived as a musician in his life, and he said, I'm so afraid of being rid of my anxiety because that makes me write good songs. It's so brutal, extremely brutal. So he feels trapped in that he don't really want to get rid of his anxiety. So these kind of things we have to deal with. And these things are the ways that we cope with them. we make our fears into our career or something else. So then it feels like the whole foundation is moving when we question them. But yes, most people don't feel fears like it's not staring us in the face at all. It is very subtle, and it is in everything. And if you observe yourself, you will notice when you are more fear-ridden and when you're not. With fear also comes a very strong sense of separation. You have a much stronger sense that I have to protect me and mine. And it can be difficult to have feelings like being generous to strangers or even open up to people because you have to protect so much. So when these fears go, there's also completely new possibilities. And many people also experience it as that the world around them have changed, or that their life has changed. People have become nicer, more harmonious. But that is just what happens when fear goes. Because also fear attracts fear. So if you are afraid of being used, for example, that other people taking advantage of you, you will attract that. That energy will be there. So that is much more likely to happen. And when you have no fear of that, it's very unlikely to happen. But many people think that I am a victim of this. People are so nasty. But when there is no opening, then how nasty a person might be or have those tendencies, they cannot be expressed if there has to be a receiver. So many things are, and since we are experiencing through this body and we see the world through one subjective view, we're very blind to what that is. We don't see that we are fearful. So that's also why self-observance becomes such a great thing. Because many people are great at giving advice to others. Because you see your friend and you see how they change. Always when they go into a relationship, they change their behavior or whatever happens with them. And you can say, but this is happening to you because you see it from the outside. But with yourself, you're home blind. And with taking time of just observing the experience, you come into a very neutral space of just being. And then it feels like you see this person as just another person, like you would observe someone else. But as soon as you're invested in it, as soon as there's identification with it, you're blind again. And people often talk about these moments in meditation as clarity. I saw everything so clearly for a while, and then it feels like the garden grows back. And when you see your fears, it's very easy to see them in others. Because when they're suppressed and in the subconscious, you meet someone else and you must just have the feeling that you don't like them because they just trigger your fear. They might have the same fear as you have, and you just feel like, oh, I'm not really sure about this person. But if the fear is completely done, you will also see the other person just with empathy, because you will see their suffering. You will see what's happening. It feels so strange sometimes when I look at things and the information that many of us are exposed to, that it is so much focus on the mind. I understand the appeal of it, and that it feels very much like something tangible. But the mechanics of the experience and beingness is just much more interesting. Or non-interesting. And this space that comes with beingness and its completeness. It's it Ashtavakra that wrote, "Rest in the space where ecstasy is futile." This is beautiful. And it just means where the surface experience does not matter. Because beingness is just more prominent. The beauty of not having any agenda with this moment. That it's unfolding can just allow itself to happen. And that this moment doesn't need anything. There is no missing component. There is no lack. And when the mind is not caught of things, changefulness can really move. Change can happen so quickly because there is no expectations. And not because quick change is especially good. It's just if it happens, it happens. But when the mind has expectations, it's locked. It becomes rigid. And it becomes very specific. These things are the things that are allowed to be happening in my experience. Everything else is not that. That is the play of expectation. Always in time. Always with a gain. And a good question is, what is freedom? We can have our societal ideas of what freedom is and how it is created. You probably had people around you growing up, or parents telling you what a good life is and what to strive for, from how they saw it. And I think it's a great thing to ask for yourself, what is freedom? And how does it relate to time?
If I make a try, freedom is freedom from bondage of the mind, then there is nothing to do with time. What is?
And practically, what is that? Not as an idea. What is that in practice?
That's me.
But I'm asking you.
Okay. Being in the moment. That's just an idea.
Yes, the idea of being in the moment.
Yes.
And the mind will have a tendency to make everything into a philosophy. And you might say, yeah, now I'm into this being in the moment thing. I'm trying that for a while. I've been trying that for a couple of months now. But the notion of that is ridiculous, because you are always this moment. You just believe that you are something else. And this belief of being something else is what creates all sense of separation. And all this feeling of victimhood, and that your life is your life situation, and all these things. So the interesting thing is that the question, who am I? What is freedom? What is the purpose? They all lead to the same thing. They can seem like they're different facets of meditation, and that you can polish them somehow, and you can learn more about the freedom part, and you can learn more about the who am I part, and this is how the mind can compartmentalize it. but it's all about being. You are beingness, freedom is beingness, all other. There is no other aspect of meditation than that. But it's just that is so little to grasp. So that's why we use all the other words. And that's because you will have one idea how you are approaching meditation. And for me, it's not so much about freedom. It's more da-da-da. And you have your take on it. But the more you look at it, the more you will notice that it's always the same. Always the same thing. It is the present moment. If you call it meditation, if you call it the present moment, if you call it life itself, if you call it beingness, if you call it awareness, whatever you want. And different meditation traditions have these different flavors. One tradition might be the freedom tradition, the meaning tradition, the inquiry tradition. But they always lead to the same thing. As also the jhana and the bhakti that we talked about so many times, the more intellectual approach and the more devotional approach. They lead to exactly the same thing, to just being. It's just that there is balance needed. If you're too much intellectual, you're too skeptical usually. You don't have enough faith. You cannot let go. Everything has to be thought out. Everything has to be dissected. And if you're devotional, you're so trusting. But you never ask the hard questions because everything is just love. There's just Krishna. There's just this and this. So the balance has to be there. But how that balance is achieved is you noticing how you're off balance. And it's usually not in ways that you think. And when it shows itself, you might not like it. For me, it showed itself like I needed more devotion. And I just thought that was dogmatic religion. I didn't like it at all. But I said, okay, if this is what it takes. Because the intuitive longing to know is there. And it doesn't care about your preferences. Or if you like it or not. If it fits in with the rest of your life or all those kind of things that you can have. It just plainly shows you. And I cannot emphasize enough that this is not what you think. Because you can feel like, but I have read a lot. I've read a lot of masters. I met a lot of teachers. I practiced a lot. I think I have a pretty good grasp on what it is. It's so easy to do that assumption, especially if you have been at it for a while. And it overwhelms you a bit when you realize that, okay, it's not at all. Because the flavor of meditation is suddenly something completely different from what you were looking for, some big explosion of freedom and lack of ego. And then you can come into a space where there is only the feeling of death. And you say, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up for the white-dressed people on the beach. This beautiful retreat place in the forest. That's what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for death. But it all has its beauty. And life is wonderful in that way that it wants to show us. Especially if we really want to look. If we're very honest with our experience and dare to ask the uncomfortable questions. Because there's something intuitively that usually knows. It can come up and you can push it away a little bit, but after a while it just comes and it comes again. And you start to have a vague sense that there's some kind of avoidance in my practice. What is that? And it can just feel like the practice is really nice, but there you have this lingering sense of avoidance in it. And you notice that you always go to the same point and then you always change because there is something that is uncomfortable. And these things can be very subtle. The egoic mind can be very subtle. And if you do a lot of inquiry, you probably notice that the mind starts talking as much. But it can still have an agenda. It can still has its things that it wants and longing for and all this. But it just doesn't use as much words anymore because it feels like you're onto the words. And when the silence starts to come, the spontaneous meditative silence rolls in. The egoic mind feels like it has two choices. Either to partake and become the meditator and praise how wonderful it is that meditation is here and that there is so much silence, or completely resist. Usually it plays a little bit of both. But the more difficult one of the two is the one that says meditation is going great now. Especially if you for a long time have felt meditation is not going so great. It feels like a relief somehow, but the egoic mind just really pumps you up. Because it wants to be a part of it. It wants to make it into an experience that you can remember. And that is connected to your personality somehow. Adyashanti, famous Zen teacher, he called this phenomena the superiority man in himself when he recognized it. He just watched it and he sat with his teacher, and there came a strong feeling that I am the best meditator here. And it sounds so ridiculous, but that is also so much how the mind operates. When it has its chance to take that position, it's just, I've been practicing for a long time, I'm really ahead. And it takes the position. And it's just one side of the same thing, that you also feel like the meditation is not going very well and that you're a worthless meditator, not very good at this. That's just the other side of the coin. And this is what meditation is freedom from. Is the freedom from good or bad days. The freedom from being for or against. And when I talk like this, I understand that it can be interpreted in the relative and very confusing, because it sounds like you have to take a stand, but it's not a stand of apathy. You understand? It's not a stand of being passive. That is how the mind interprets it. Okay, I'm not for or against, so I don't care. That is my stand. But that is also a stand that the mind takes. Because the understanding of that for and against is nothing. Is so different from taking a stand of the idea that it is pointless. And again, it has to go through experiencing. It cannot go through the mind. And the reason that you have to look into the experience itself and be with it is because otherwise it will just be a philosophy. And I know that you can feel safe of holding it like that for a while, but it will be so frustrating. And maybe you have to go through that. That's also fine. You have to come to a point where you feel like giving up and I cannot figure this out and all these things. And you might have to come to the point where you feel there's no other way than really looking. I thought I had this opening to just reason my way through this. Any more questions today? No. Håkan has another one. Okay.
So isn't there always a risk that we go here and listen and feed the mind?
Yes.
And what can we do about it? We have to ask questions or what?
Yes, but if I try to be very transparent with you, and also what I see when I sit here with you, and when you ask questions, how you reason with them, and I see that most people just catch it very intellectually. And I really try to bypass that. I really try to talk to the part in you that is not that is not mind. I try to talk in a way that is very straight and very to your beingness, so that you can recognize it in this moment. That is the purpose of this conversation. And I cannot really help you, because you have to look. I cannot really do anything for you, actually, but to question your answers. And the experience that is there is that sometimes when you ask your questions, it's like you're trying to convince me that the world is dual and separate. And to me, it feels like a joke. Someone can ask a very, very serious question, and I start to smile, because to me it seems ridiculous. But that is the experience also when I'm at the supermarket and I'm talking to someone there. They also talk about the world as if it's dual. Someone is frustrated in the queue, or yes. And I really try to refrain from sugarcoating meditation, because I feel like a lot of teachers do that because they're afraid that they won't have enough students if they don't. So they don't talk about that you will have a feeling of dying if you that those things might happen. And I think there is there has to be an honesty with those things, because people get the feeling, like many people have the feeling of meditation, that it's very lovey-dovey, that is very, it will just be, if I start with it, I will just feel better and better and better if I just can muster the energy to do it. But that is not the experience. It will be very challenging, and you have to be very truthful with yourself. That's what I refer to as sincerity in it. Because otherwise it would just be a play of trying to stay positive and trying to develop certain qualities. And you will ask yourself after a while, but what happens with all the darkness within me? Where is the space for that? And in meditation, there is you have to embrace all of it. You have to embrace your fears. It's not a bad thing that your fears are coming up. That's actually something that just very naturally should happen in your practice. But when I talk about that a lot, I also feel like I have to balance that with talking about how beautiful meditation is. And that beingness is the sense of completeness. And when you see it in others, there is so much love. You only see them as that and as love. How troubled they ever might be, how sad they ever might be, you see all that beauty of their presence. And it's so easy to come to empathy. When the egoic mind reigns, it's so difficult. If the trance is there, all these ideas have been stuck like a fog. And you see everything through that, through your fears. As we talked about before, people are using me or this and that. Then it's very difficult to have empathy with people. But when there is nothing in the way, it's very, very easy. Even the difficult and crazy ones are beautiful in there. And there is nothing to be afraid of.
I have a question about the fog.
Yes.
We talked about fears before, and the experience for me is that there seem to be some fears that are coming cyclically. Sort of, there is openness, but then there are periods when there is just, I can see that there is a lot of aversion and fear, but it's a fog in the sense that I can't see what what the problem is, so to speak.
No.
It's just a feeling of
Okay.
me being donkey shot in a world where, and I can see that, but there's confusion, and it seems to be easier with something where I can see what the problem is. I can see that I'm jealous. I can see that but this ignorance part where I can't seem to see what it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that is what ignorance is.
Yeah.
But it's just very different when you are on track with that there is ignorance in your experience. I would say that many people don't have that view. They say that they know who they are, they know what certain things are, and there's so much fear in that, and they're very protective. If you would start to poke in that, if you start to have conversations like these, they will be very unsettled. So it's a beautiful thing to understand that there is ignorance, and to be aware that, okay, it's very foggy now. Because from the egoic mind, it's very easy to go to, okay, it's very foggy now and I feel very unsure of everything. I have to take a very firm stance, the mind can say, so I can show that I am really a someone in a something. And that is very much the play of that kind of fear. And that makes a very, very firm stance as identity. And then there can be no openness. But in the dual experience, ignorance and fogginess, that is the world. It is walking around in the world blind because there is no clear sense of what is what, because I feel separate with the world and my feelings feels like they're happening to me, and I am someone trying to solve this somehow, searching. All those things are based out of wrong assumptions. But that doesn't make them wrong. Can you understand that? because the search itself is not wrong if you feel dual. But if you would see that it's not dual, then it would seem ridiculous to search. But that is not possible if you don't see it. Then you will try, and then you will try to convince. you go around, convince everyone that the world is dual. If you want it or not. That is because that is the disposition that you have. It's unavoidable. So, and as so many teachers in all times have said, when someone said, yes, but I want to make things better in the world, they say, first know yourself. Then see what do you want to do with the world. But it's also kind of humorous, and I think for me, I realized it quite as a young adult that adults have no idea what they're doing. And when I was younger, I thought that when I start to work and when you start to get out of the school world and into the real world, people will know what they're doing. And they were just the same as all the kids. Completely confused and anxious. And it was just... But in a sense, I think that was a relief I felt with that. I understood that, okay, there is nothing to adulthood. There's nothing magical with it. It doesn't solve anything. We have to go look at something else. But the recognition that there is fog is a very good recognition. Because there is openness in that. Even though it might not always feel so nice. And you see someone else who's just taken a very firm stance, a very hard grasp of an idea, and it just seems very... I understand that some people see that and just find it so appealing. Someone says, I know exactly, I'm just following this self-help book or this guidance, and from point A to point Z, and step by step. It's so good, everything feels so secure. But all this external security becomes false security. Because we do not know what will happen. And I think that this part is very, very easy to understand. That life just happens. And if you have some mileage, you notice it. Random, strange things happen and your life changes in ways that you could never predict. And suddenly you start to be more like, okay, let's just see what happens. And you can try to tame life, but it's very, very hard work. A lot of knocking your head on a stone wall. But there's also all these different psychological dispositions that we have. We have our tendency. And some people just have to... Some people are really they just want to go and do until it doesn't work anymore. And they break down a little bit and then they do it again. And that's how they learn. And others are much more much softer in their disposition and allows things to come to them. And it's just people are just different there.
I sat in the forest once and I watched water running down, and when I watched a part of the water hit a stone, and immediately when it hit the stone it chose the shortest path after that, because it's just gravity, and it just went left. And in that moment I just thought I would like to be like that water. But yeah, I guess I'm more the water that hits the stone goes back, it hits the stone again.
Yes, but all those things happen because there is a someone. Because that life feels like a calibration. You understand what I mean by that? That you all the time have to calibrate yourself after something. That is what the ego does. It says, now we have to fit into my workplace better, I should be more like this. Or if I'm going to do this, I have to. And you calibrate all the time. And you try to become something that is your idea of how that person would work. But as you might have noticed, that is very tiresome. And it also might give, in the long run, a very dishonest image of how you are, because when you try to calibrate yourself for every situation, then people, oh, yes, he's the guy that can do this and this, but you don't really like to do that. You just mainly did it because to fit in. And now you're that guy. And all these things happen. And then the karma of that continues and continues. So also when beingness is driving, there is nothing of that. There is no continuation of it because you are what you are. Not the idea of what you are. And there is no calibration. It's the calibration of life. And when you say, I would like to be that water, you are that water. But you are that water trying to be in a different way.
Yeah,
But
the irony there as well.
Yes. And that's why it comes down to trust so much. Because most people feel like, but if I'm just truly myself, maybe no one will like me. Or I won't fit in, or I will just be really strange. Or whatever. And it's usually the complete opposite. Even if you would be quite a strange person, but if you're really authentic, people are usually have no problem with that. Very good. We should sing something. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Thank you, thank you.